Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to Wild Werewolf. Are you ready to embark on a wild and thrilling journey into the world of werewolves? Here, we'll explore the untamed nature, the raw power, and the captivating stories of these mythical creatures. So, get comfortable and let's unleash the wildness together. Werewolf Forest, Chapter 30. My head gently rose and fell with his chest as he took shallow breaths. My hand rested on his bare chest. I looked up at his sleeping face, his lips slightly parted in peaceful bliss. I nuzzled my head on his shoulder and pulled myself closer to him, wrapping one leg over his. Life mates were connected in ways that only they could understand. I felt his soft heartbeat under my ear, but also in my own chest. His breathing, his senses, I could feel them all as if they were my own. He was like an extension of me, an extension of touch, smell, sound, and mind. I could see the colors of his dreams swirl in my head, twisting and turning in harmony. We were a single person, split into the entities. I felt bad that I had to wake him up, but we had to get ready. Andrew, I whispered, rubbing my hand across his chest and shoulders. In his sleep, he wrapped his arm tighter around my waist. Maggie, he sighed. Andrew, we have to get up. I sat up, hugging the blanket to my bare chest. I swung my leg over him and straddled his waist. Come on now. It's time to get up. I kissed him, his lips still as stone against mine. I pulled back just a little so my face hovered over his and watched as his eyes fluttered open. A sleepy smile spread across his lips. Well, he said, wrapping his arms around me. I could get used to waking up like this. I smiled a little at that. As much as I hate to ruin this moment, we have to get up. Both of our smiles faded. Yeah, he said. I know. We got up in silence and found our clothes. I left Andrew to get dressed and went to my room. Ella's bed was perfectly made and her belongings packed. If we were to lose today, we would have to run. Staying around here would be risky, so having her things ready to go was smart. I turned to my bed and picked up the pieces of black fabric that were laying there. There was a note on top. These clothes will be easier to fight in. Please wear them, everyone. They will make it easier to move, and they will be easier to shift in. I want us all to have every advantage we can. Connor. The black fabric was stretchy and clung to my body. But he was right, they were easier to move in than the normal blue jean cut-offs. The shorts came to my mid-thigh, and the top was a tight, fitting camisolo with no sleeves. I rubbed my hands over my bare arms, feeling a slight chill. Goosebumps rose on my skin, but not from the cold, but from fear. The hour was drawing closer and closer, and there, alone, in that room, the fear sunk in. I tried my best to put it out of my mind and remain strong. I reached under my bed and grabbed a hold of the folding combat knife that Connor had given everyone. I flicked it open and cut slits in the back of the camisolo for my wings to slip through. I stretched my wings in the room, the tips hitting the walls and curling inward. I wrapped them about myself and crouched in my feathery white tent. I breathed deep and clenched my jaw, trembling. I held onto the knife, gripping the hilt until my knuckles flushed white. I flipped it closed and clipped it to my side, hiding it under the tight fabric. I took one last look at my room and shut the door behind me. Everyone was out in the courtyard, gathering for what might be their final march. The girls were all dressed like me, and all the guys had the same shorts, but were without a shirt. We were all dressed in the same tight, black fabric, as if we were in our own funeral procession. Andrew stood beside me, dressed in the same black veil, his hand clutched in mine. We'll leave in 20 minutes. A messenger carried Connors around the pack. The betas of the packs had each been assigned to their own company. They spoke to them in soft tones, going over positions and strategies. Hey. Bailey ran out of the crowd towards us. Have you guys seen her eyes travel down to our intertwined hands? Wait, she looked at us closer, sensing the bond. When it finally clicked, a wide smile spread across her face. Finally. She jumped and wrapped her arms around me. As much as I'd like to just celebrate this, we have a problem. She let go of me, her elated face now sober. Have either of you seen Ellie? I can't find her anywhere, and no one else has seen her either. No, I haven't. Have you? I asked Andrew. No, I'll talk to Connor about it. I have to find him anyway. All right. Well, you better hurry up. I think HES up in the library. Bailey turned away. Hey, Bailey. Wait. I turned to Andrew and put my hand on his shoulder. Go find Connor. He'll catch up. All right. He leaned down and kissed me softly. He'll see you in a sec. Love you. Love you too. Love you too. And with that he disappeared inside the house. Bailey, I said, turning to her. Have you been assigned to a company? Yeah. And in Blake's company, why? Tell Blake that Connor has pulled you for a different assignment. I don't want him to plan on having you there and be one person short when you come with Mayho. Yeah. All right. He'll take care of it. She turned away back to Blake, who was giving orders to his company. I looked over the crowd. I knew many of them, but others were strangers. I spotted Davo, Kyle, Luke, Cece, and Donnie, who smiled at me when he caught my gaze. They were my friends, my newfound family, and, by the end of today, they could all be dead. If I failed to kill James, their blood would be on my hands. The dream came back to me again. The terrible creatures standing over our mangled bodies. But this time, Kyle, Luke, and Donnie, my brothers in arms, were there too. Disfigured and dismembered by the creature's razor claws. Hey, Mags. I hadn't noticed Donnie walk up to me. You okay, kid? He put his hand under my chin and lifted my face up to look in his piercing blue eyes. Yeah, I'm all right, Donnie. Just nervous is all. He snickered and put his hands on my shoulders. Aren't we all? Look, everything's gonna be okay. Well, get in there. You'll kill James. And after that, everything will be copacetic, I see. He leaned back and waved his hand dismissively in the air. I chuckled humorlessly. No pressure. Hey guys. And Rue came up behind us and wrapped his arms around my waist. Hey man, how you been? Donnie looked at us, flabbergasted. He looked from my face to Andrew's hands intertwined on my stomach, to Andrew and back again. No way I could feel Andrew nod his head behind me. That's Brady, my fated mate. White flashed around me and my room spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. He asked me. Uh-huh, I said, grinning. Fucking finally. Man let go of me and hugged Donnie. Donnie then grabbed me and twirled me around in a circle. I knew it. I knew you two would bang eventually. Donnie, I said, my cheeks going red. Andrew slapped the back of his head. That's Spidey, my fated mate. White splashed around me and my wind spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. You're dead, said Donnie, shrugging his shoulders. Andrew just shook his head. Get back to your company, Donnie. Well, fine. If you're gonna be like that, Donnie mumbled as he walked back towards his company. Megs, we have trouble, Andrew said, pulling me away from the crowd. Connor says that Ellie isn't the only one missing. Apparently, Gunnar and some pups have disappeared too. I don't know about the pups or about Gunnar, but Ellie would never desert us right before we leave for the battle. There was a long silence. He looked at me pointedly. No, you don't think. It's possible there was more than one traitor. He sadly looked me in the eye. Ellie. She would she? She does have a past with them. and she is one of 10 people who know where the battle will take place. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying it's possible, and we shouldn't mention this to anyone. I don't want to stir a panic. Everyone is on edge as it is. He grabbed onto my hand, interlacing his fingers with mine. He led me back to the crowd of people. Fear polluted the air, swirling like a foul cloud around the pack. The tension seemed as though it would snap at any moment, and the eyes of the pack were nervous and scared. They clamored on, barking orders and whispering words of apprehension. Their words were like a buzz around the courtyard, blending and filling the space. Connor walked out of the house and the pack immediately went silent. He jumped onto the picnic table and Andrew followed him. "Everyone," said Connor. "I want to thank all of you who have stayed to fight. I know it's risky and dangerous, and victory is uncertain and unlikely. But we have sat idle for far too long. I have let my brother run amok and let countless die and their lives ripped from under them. But no longer. I will not allow this to continue. I will not lie. There's a good chance many of us are going to die. But if I am to die today, in taking those bastards down with me, to the cheering of the crowd," he shook and blurred, shifting into his wolf. His timber, brave fur bristled on his spine. He raised his nose to the sky, shutting his eyes against the sun. He let out a howl, deep and ringing. Andrew followed him, letting out a howl to harmonize. Slowly as clay, rank by rank, the pack shifted and joined him, and I followed. Our chorus rang out among the trees, at least 200 wolves of different tones and pitches. We belted the tone out to the mountains, singing our sorrows and fears. Connor lowered his head and jumped off the table, barking for us to follow. He ran into the trees, the pack following after him. I paused and looked at the house one last time. The sun was shining off the walls of windows, sparkling like jewels. It was my home. The only place that I could call that. I turned and ran with the flow of fur into the forest. We ran for over an hour, getting deeper and deeper into the forest. Connor took us in the opposite direction of civilization, towards the mountains. Then we slowed to a halt near a large clearing. I listened through Andrew's mind as Connor gave orders to the company's commanders. "Peter and Milo, take the west edge of the field. Jesse and Frank, the east. Blake, you take my right flank. Amy, take the left flank. And Andy and Emma, take center. Wait for my signal." The commanders took their orders and led their companies to their positions. Andrew, Maggie, Cece, Cameron, Devo, you're with me. We filed around Connor and waited. The forest was silent. The little creatures had run away, as if they had been warned of the oncoming massacre. Even the wind seemed to blow slower and colder. The only sound was our breathing and fearful heartbeats. Connor's eyes never left the field, waiting and waiting for the long overdue reunion. A single deep brown wolf broke through the tree line. Danny. He sniffed the air, catching our scent. His eyes snapped to our hiding place in the bushes and he seemed to smile, dark and sinister. He sat back on his haunches and raised his nose to the sun. His howl was deep and ominous. It pounded in my ears like war drums. Slowly, more and more wolves emerged from the trees. As his howl grew in volume, the edge of the clearing filled with a sea of ragged fur. There were hundreds of them. We were easily outnumbered 3-1. I could feel the dread in the air as the flow of wolves continued. Andrew looked down at me. "It'll be okay," he thought. The light parents dealt to their children on their deathbeds did little to comfort me. I didn't reply, simply looked over the sea of brown and gray death. It hovered like a vulture waiting for an animal to die beneath it. There was no way we could win. There were too many of them. Then it finally dawned on me. I was going to die. We were all going to die. Connor's words rang in my head. If I am to die today, I'm taking those bastards down with me. Werewolf Forest Chapter 31 Recap. The forest was silent. The little creatures had run away, as if they had been warned of the oncoming massacre. Even the wind seemed to blow slower and colder. The only sound was our breathing and fearful heartbeats. Connor's eyes never left the field, waiting and waiting for the long overdue reunion. A single deep brown wolf broke through the tree line. Danny. He sniffed the air, catching our scent. His eyes snapped to our hiding place in the bushes and he seemed to smile, dark and sinister. He sat back on his haunches and raised his nose to the sun. His howl was deep and ominous. It pounded in my ears like war drums. Slowly, more and more wolves emerged from the trees. As his howl grew in volume, the edge of the clearing filled with a sea of ragged fur. There were hundreds of them. We were easily outnumbered 3-1. I could feel the dread in the air as the flow of wolves continued. Andrew looked down at me. It'll be okay, he thought. The like parents dealt to their children on their deathbeds did little to comfort me. I didn't reply, simply looked over the sea of brown and gray death. It hovered like a vulture waiting for an animal to die beneath it. There was no way we could win. There were too many of them. Then it finally dawned on me. I was going to die. We were all going to die. Connor's words rang in my head. If I am to die today, in taking those bastards down with me. Chapter 31. Gage and Jason flanked Danny in their synchronized dance as he stalked to the center of the field. We watched in silence as they shifted to their human forms, still as menacing as before. The air was silent, not a single word spoken, or breath taken. Connor slowly emerged from the bushes, showing himself to Danny. Their eyes met, Connor's filled with fear and anger, Danny's with an unfeeling, empty arrogance. He smirked at Connor as he walked, not a trace of fear about him. We slowly followed behind him, as did the companies covering our flanks. Once out of the trees, the company stopped, following unspoken orders from Connor. Everyone keep your cool. Don't let them bait you. We have to stall the battle as long as we can. It will take time for the others to get into position. Stay with me and follow my lead. Connor shifted as we walked, and we followed suit. We stopped in the middle of the field, but 5 feet from Danny. Danny and Connor never lost eye contact, staring each other down. Standing next to each other, they looked as similar as twins, yet as different as day and night. They both towered to the same height. Their hair and eyes were the same color. But Danny looked as if he was in shadow, as if he existed only in an alternate, darker world. Danny's eyes were empty of all but bloodlust, and Connor had too many to identify. "Little brother," said Danny. "It has been far too long." He smiled, sizing Connor up. "Far too long," agreed Connor. "Now, little brother, we both know how this will end. Why not give up now? You could fight and die. Or you could surrender, upon which only most of you will die." He eyed our troops back on the tree line. "No, Danny, this ends here. You versus me. Like it should have been a long time ago." Connor took a step forward, sending a ripple of strained growls across both packs. Now, little brother, no need to get testy. Let me see if I can get you to reconsider my offer." He waved his hand in the air. Men from his pack broke through the crowd of claws and fur. Each held the shoulders of a person with a bag over their head and their arms bound behind their backs. They brought their prisoners before us and pushed them to their knees. A line of Danny's men stood between the prisoners and us. One by one, the men pulled the bags off their heads. Ellie looked up at us from the ground, her starburst eyes wide in fear. All the other missing pack members were lined up beside her. The man holding Ellie grabbed her by her hair and pulled it back, exposing her throat. He pulled a knife from his belt and flipped it open. "Surrender and I will spare them. Though I wish I could say the same for you, little brother. Connor, don't do it. He'll kill us anyway, yelled Ellie. Danny whipped around and kicked her in the stomach, making her double over in pain. You really must teach your bitches to mind their tongues, little brother, said Danny as he turned back to us. You bastard. Connor looked to Ellie, then to Gunnar and the rest of the captives. All that were able shook their heads. Their eyes glazed over as they spoke to Connor silently, telling him not to do it. He closed his eyes and clenched his fists by his side. I will not surrender. Of course not. You are far too stubborn for your own good little brother. He turned and nodded to the man holding Ellie. He pulled Della's head back again, as did the rest of the men holding captives. Danny, stop this. Connor pushed against the line of men, trying to get to our pack members, but they held him back. Fight like a man, you coward. Ellie looked to each one of us, and nodded as much as she could. We each nodded back to her. Then, in a second of horror, the men slashed the captives' throats open. No, screamed Connor. Their limp bodies fell to the ground, lifeless. Danny clicked his tongue in scorn. Oh, little brother, he looked back to the lifeless bodies as they soaked the grass red with blood. The men began to drag the bodies away, tossing them into the bushes at the side of the clearing. She was right, though. He turned back to us and grinned. I would have killed them anyway, just for the fun of it. You bastard. Connor strained against the line of soldiers, but Andrew grabbed his arm and pulled him back. Not yet. I could hear Andrew's thoughts as he sent them to Connor. Not yet, Connor. The others aren't ready. If we start the battle now, it'll be Massacre. We need to stall a little bit longer. Andrew, they just executed 7 of our people in front of us. Ellis dead. Connor backed away from the soldiers and turned to Andrew. There was nothing we could do. Connor nodded his head. Little brother, you do make this far too easy on me. You care far too much about your pack, and life in general. I can threaten the life of a single, insignificant person, and get you to do anything I want. Or, if you don't, the guilt eats you alive. Quite entertaining to watch, actually. You're sick, Daniel, Connor growled. You put too much faith in people as well. Danny picked at his nails dismissively. It was all too easy to turn one of your own against you. So easy, all right, Danny. You've had your time to gloat. So who is it, huh? Bring your informant forward. Bring him out. Let him face me like a man, not the cowardly slug he is. He looked behind Danny to the pack standing in the distance and yelled to them. Let the traitor show his face. Danny chuckled. Oh, little brother, you are so easily fooled. Why don't you come forward, my dear? We all looked to the Massacre behind him, waiting for one to step forward. No one moved. Someone bumped against my shoulder as they walked to the very center of the field. I didn't want to believe it, though it was right there in front of me. We all stood, stunned. She turned around to face us, her light, wavy hair blowing in the slight breeze. Danny took her hand and kissed it. She was a wonderful little actress, wasn't she? Cece smiled at us, surprised. Cece, it was you. Connor stepped back as if he were struck. I had on why. Oh, Connor, I wish you could see. Humans are vermin. They don't deserve to continue existence. They should have been wiped out a long time ago. In that moment, her eyes seemed to change. The normal glisten, the shine of elation and optimism, died out. Her eyes were as dead as Danny's. Their void of darkness stared us down with no emotion. All ties of friendship were lost. More accurately, they never existed. No, Cece, you love people. You love everyone. You're one of the nicest people I've ever met on Tokamofit, Connor. I never meant anything I said. Well, not for the last couple of years anyway. Jason here found me one night and opened my eyes. She sauntered over to Jason and wrapped her arms around his neck. You have no idea how insufferable it was to deal with all your inferior drama. Constantly defending the pathetic humans. It made me sick. Then her eyes shifted once more. I could see the spark again. Join us. All of you. She walked back to us, her arms outstretched. Join us and help us create a new, superior race. Help us rid the world of those parasites. She walked over to Connor and placed a hand on his arm. We can create a new world. A better world. Connor jerked his arm away from her. Don't touch me. You betrayed all of us. It's your fault our friends are dead. The shine died away from her eyes once more, as she dropped her hand and walked back to Jason. No, Connor. It's your fault, she said as she grabbed onto Jason's hand. Come on, babe. Let's go. She stared, pulling him back towards the rest of the pack. He pulled his hand out of her grasp. He'll be there in a second. She nodded and shifted, running back and melded into the sea of our doom. Jason turned to me then, a smirk on his face. Hello there, Maggie. It is so nice to see you again. We stood but 4 feet apart as he stared me down. When this is over, I'll enjoy breaking you again. He brushed his hand against the side of my face. The memories of our past flowed into my mind. I felt Enru's horror and panic as he saw my memories. I tried to stop them, but it was too late. Andrew knew everything. His rage flared like kerosene added to a fire. He looked at Andrew with murderous intentions. I snapped back to reality and slapped Jason's hand away. When this is over, Jason, I'll enjoy making you beg for death. His smirk faded and he turned and followed Cece. Andrew looked over at me, but said nothing. I could feel his horror, and that was enough. Danny and Connor were staring each other down, their eyes locked. Danny smirked at Connor, arrogant and sure. Connor steamed with anger and pain, his muscles clenching and his hands trembling. Oh, little brother, what would our dear mother say about our little predicament here? Rest her poor soul. Danny shook his head and looked up to the sky. Don't you bring her into this. Don't you speak of her. Connor almost lunged at Danny, but Andrew held him back. I still remember her face when she realized who I was. When she realized just who was ending her life, he traced his thumb across his lips. Her blood did taste oh so sweet, you bastard. Connor broke free of Andrew's grasp and shifted. In a flash, he was on top of Danny, teeth and claws slashing. In a roar of trampling paws and growls, our pack flooded out of the trees. The 2 packs met in a clash of teeth and blood. The wolves moved in a blur, like a picture of moving cars. I stretched my wings and shot into the air to avoid a charging wolf. I looked out over the battlefield. Wolves and humans fought alike, ripping each other limb from limb. I held and discerned my pack from theirs. It was all one mass of fur and blood. I took a breath in the thinner air, shut my wings, and dove back into the fray. Werewolf Forest to Chapter 32 recap. Danny and Connor were staring each other down, their eyes locked. Danny smirked at Connor, arrogant and sure. Connor steamed with anger and pain, his muscles clenching and his hands trembling. Oh, little brother, what would our dear mother say about our little predicament here? Rest her poor soul. Danny shook his head and looked up to the sky. Don't you bring her into this. Don't you speak of her. Connor almost lunged at Danny, but Andrew held him back. I still remember her face when she realized who I was. When she realized just who was ending her life, he traced his thumb across his lips. Her blood did taste oh so sweet, you bastard. Connor broke free of Andrew's grasp and shifted. In a flash, he was on top of Danny, teeth and claws slashing. In a roar of trampling paws and growls, our pack flooded out of the trees. The 2 packs met in a clash of teeth and blood. The wolves moved in a blur, like a picture of moving cars. I stretched my wings and shot into the air to avoid a charging wolf. I looked out over the battlefield. Wolves and humans fought alike, ripping each other limb from limb. I held and discerned my pack from theirs. It was all one mess of fur and blood. I took a breath in the thinner air, shut my wings, and dove back into the fray. Chapter 13. All was chaos. There seemed to not be a single place without a pair of wolves slashing at each other's throats. Not one moment with the blood, curdling cries of a dying wolf. Not one blade of grass not stained red. I pushed and stumbled my way through the clusters of murderous rage. I ran as fast as I could, throwing my shield at anyone who tried to get near me. I had to find Bailey. The adrenaline seared through me, and I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. I tripped as something fell at my feet. I felt a hand grab onto my leg as I tried to get up. I looked back to see a boy, no older than 20. He had claw marks from his forehead to his stomach. Chunks of flesh were missing from his arm and shoulder. "Help me," he stuttered, blood spraying from his lips. "Help me." The battle was nothing like what I heard in stories or history books, nor at all what I expected. We have always revered the victorious, glorified their bloody actions. We were right. We said, we were the good guys. But in truth, I couldn't see the difference. Our packs lashed and bit just as ruthlessly as Danny's. I saw no glory, no honor. I shook off his weak grip and ran. I didn't look back. I found Bailey fighting off to wolves in a far corner of the field. Without slowing my sprint, I lifted one unsuspecting wolf from the ground and flung him into the other. "Bailey," she turned and saw me. "Maggie, this is out of hand. We're getting massacred." "There are too many." "I know," I said. "We have to find James. Stay close to me." She nodded and followed me as we ran through the bustling, bloody masses. In our smaller human forms, we could maneuver easier than the wolves. I sniffed the air, searching. I could smell his wretched musk from across the field. James. We moved quicker through the field, our fate closer at hand. When we found him, he was surrounded by 3 wolves. As they began to close in, he smiled at them. One wolf yelped and began to twitch and move around sporadically. Then he turned to his comrade. He jumped on top of him, his comrade yelling in confusion. James watched, laughing, as the fellow packmates ripped each other apart. The 3rd wolf jumped on top of James, bringing him to the ground. The 2 wolves stopped fighting and fell to the ground, heaving in pain. James kicked the wolf so powerfully that he collided with a tree and snapped it in half. The force of the impact shocked the wolf into turning back into its human form. Kyle fell to the ground at the base of the tree, unconscious. I tried to run to him, but James was there before I even started. I tried to run faster, but the faster I ran, the more I seemed to stay still. James pulled a knife from his belt and raised it above his head. My legs were moving at record pace, but I felt like I was stuck in slow motion. "No," I screamed. "Kyle." James looked up, the knife still above his head. When he saw me, he smiled. I was so close, yet too far away to do anything. James winked. Kyle's eyes fluttered open and he saw me. "Maggie." The weak utterance made James turn back to Kyle. I could see the sick grin on his face as he plunged the knife deep into Kyle's chest now. Just then, I was able to run again. I came to his side and knelt on the ground. He had his hand at his chest where blood was seeping out of the knife wound. Before I could stop him, he gripped the handle and yanked it out of his chest. Blood poured to the ground, bubbling out of the wound like lava. I pressed my hands to the wound, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. The blood poured out from between my fingers as if they weren't even there. "Kyle, Kyle. Stay with me, Kyle. Come on. Stay with me. Please." I could feel a single tear fall from my eye. "Maggie," he coughed. His blood spurted onto my face. "I'm here, Kyle. I'm here. Just hold on, please hold on." My stomach twisted in knots. The tears flowed freely. I was begging, pleading, micing, but nothing helped. The blood just wouldn't stop. "Maggie, take care of Andrew," he coughed as he tried to laugh, gagging and sputtering on his own blood as it lined his lips with red. He smiled up at me. Despite the pain, he managed to give me one of his big whole-hearted smiles, a rare thing with his serious leadership. "The kid needs you, no, Kyle. Come on." His face got paler and paler as the life flowed out of him, staining my hands in the ground below me. "Take my body to my parents. They already know about all this." He reached to his neck and gripped a small rosary on a thin silver chain. "And tell Anna I'm sorry and that I love her." With his last bit of strength, he yanked the chain from his neck. "Give this to her. Don't let her forget me." "Anna? Who's Anna?" He looked up at me and smiled. Slowly his smile faded and his eyes unfocused. "Kyle." He didn't answer. "Kyle. Wake up, Kyle." I shook his shoulder, but he lay limp, his eyes unfocused and lifeless. The hand clasping his necklace opened slightly, the chain angling off his fingers. He was gone. I heard laughing behind me. I turned to see James grasping at his gut, doubled over in laughter. "Oh, you mortals, always so emotional, you bastard. I'll kill you." I lunged at him, taking him to the ground with me. I shifted in an instant and slashed and clawed at any opening I could find. My vision had gone red and all I could hear was his laughing. I could hear Bailey calling my name, but I didn't care. All I could focus on was his jugular, and the idea of my teeth ripping his throat out. He threw me off of him, sending me flying into the dirt. Bailey got in front of me before he could. He shoved Bailey to the ground and put his hand up, palm to her. A smile crept across his face. Bailey staggeringly got up, turned and began to walk to me. "Maggie, what's going on?" "I'm not doing this." She continued to walk toward me. "Fight like a man, James. Don't use her as a puppet because you're afraid to fight me yourself." "Now why would I do that?" he said, smirking. "This is far too much fun." Bailey ran to me and threw a punch that I barely dodged. I tried to grab her, but I could not get a hold of her flailing arms. James laughed in the background. I ducked another blow and crouched to the ground. I kicked her legs out from under her, and before she could get up, I got on top of her and pinned her to the ground. Her arms flailed as she tried to attack me, but I kept her arms restrained. I let my shield cover my body, then flow onto her. Once it had covered her, she stopped struggling. I looked over to James, who had a confused look on his face. "I see you have picked up a few new talents since we last saw each other." He spread his wings wide. "Let's see if you've still got what I taught you." With that, he shot into the air. I spread my wings. "Bailey, see what you can do down here. I don't know how much the shield will protect you when it's on both of us at once, so be careful." She nodded and I followed James into the air. "Good of you to join me," he shouted. I looked down at the ground below us. People word-eyeing. My friends. I could still see Kyle's body as it lay lifeless. I looked back to James. He beat his pitch wings as he smiled at me, the image of the angel of death. When our eyes met, the world seemed to disappear from around us. The fighting was seemingly gone. All sound became silent, and the only people left in this world were he and I. He was the undefeated terror that had kept this secret war going for so long. He was the man that had killed so many of Connor's packs in cold blood. The man that had just brutally murdered my friend, my brother in all but blood. The man that could control people with a single thought. You could be powerful, Maggie. We could rule the new world. Danny is just a pawn. What HES done? Well, get rid of him and take over. We are superior in every way. He laughed again, flapping his wings in the wind. Join me. I raised my arms, letting my shield take over. It stretched, leaping through the air. I thrust my hand through the air, plowing the shield into him. That's my answer, you sick son of a bitch. I screamed, lunging through the air. We tumbled through the air, the wind cutting across us and the world passing us in a blur. I felt his nails tear through my skin and his knees jam into my stomach. Nails raked and teeth ripped. Blood dripped from our tangled bodies to the ground below. As we tumbled through the open air, we hit the top of a pine tree at the edge of the field. We crashed through the branches as we plummeted to the ground. I retracted my wings in the fray as the branches started to hit them. Splinters dug into my skin as I slammed against the rough bark. We plowed into the ground, me on top of him. He kicked me off, sending me flying into another wolf. Quickly, I shifted and sprinted to James once again. He was up and waiting for me. I stopped in front of him, growling and snarling. He smiled at me again and shifted into a black bear, twice the size of a normal one. A fear set in the pit of my stomach, wild and primal. His deep black eyes bore into me as he stared silently. He let out a cry of battle and rose up on his haunches, slashing his claws in the air. The hair on my neck stood straight and my ears lay flat against my head. I let out a growl, but it was lost in the drone of the battle. As he rode and slashed the air, a tiger plowed into him and brought him to the ground. The tangled mess of black and red fur tumbled across the field. They broke apart and stood facing each other, neck hair raised and teeth bared. Bailey's tiger form was not that much bigger than a normal tiger, but instead of a light orange color, she was a bright, fiery red. Her black stripes flared across her back like the rays of the burning sun. I ran to her side and we faced James together. I stretched my shield over both of us, the haze just slightly distorting the scene around us. James shifted back to his human form and stared at us, smiling like the Cheshire Cat. "Look at you two little girls. How sweet," he laughed. "Well, this should be fun. Happy holidays, everyone, and Happy New Year." Not exactly a happy chapter to end the year with, but a Werewolf Forest, Chapter 33 recap. We crashed through the branches as we plummeted to the ground. I retracted my wings in the fray as the branches started to hit them. Splinters dug into my skin as I slammed against the rough bark. We plowed into the ground, me on top of him. He kicked me off, sending me flying into another wolf. Quickly, I shifted and sprinted to James once again. He was up and waiting for me. I stopped in front of him, growling and snarling. He smiled at me again and shifted into a black bear, twice the size of a normal one. A fear set in the pit of my stomach, wild and primal. His deep black eyes bore into me as he stared silently. He let out a cry of battle and rose up on his haunches, slashing his claws in the air. The hair on my neck stood straight and my ears laid flat against my head. I let out a growl, but it was lost in the drone of the battle. As he roared and slashed the air, a tiger plowed into him and brought him to the ground. The tangled mass of black and red fur tumbled across the field. They broke apart and stood facing each other, neck hair raised and teeth bared. Bailey's tiger form was not that much bigger than a normal tiger, but instead of a light orange color, she was a bright, fiery red. Her black stripes flared across her back like the rays of the burning sun. I ran to her side and we faced James together. I stretched my shield over both of us, the haze just slightly distorting the scene around us. James shifted back to his human form and stared at us, smiling like the Cheshire Cat. "Look at you two little girls. How sweet," he laughed. "Well, this should be fun." Chapter 33. Claws slashed and teeth mauled as Bailey and I stood against James. We quickly found out that my shield did nothing against his physical attacks. Our wound, ridden body showed that quite clearly. However, he couldn't use his mental attacks. The look of confusion on his face lasted only a minute when he realized this before he attacked once more. We had barely gotten one hit on him. He was far too powerful. He lashed at Bailey, his reddened claws digging deep into her shoulder. He flung her away like a paper doll and sent her crashing into a nearby tree. Bailey. I cried out. She lay limp at the base of the tree. I dropped my shield and ran at James, arms outstretched. With one swipe of the paw, I was on the ground. I raised my hand and lifted him in the air. I could feel the weight on my arms as if they were holding him themselves. I struggled, my arms shaking under the weight. In a last moment of strength, I slammed him into the ground as hard as I possibly could. I fell to the ground, my energy exhausted. I watched as he got up off the ground and brushed the dirt off himself. He sauntered over to where I lay, broken and staining the grass red with my blood. He knelt down to my level and smiled. You stupid child, thinking you could kill me. You could have been my apprentice and ruled over these inferior mongrels at my side. But you chose to defy. Too bad. Really, such talent. He brushed a piece of hair from my face. Wasted in a quick movement, he grabbed onto me, shooting into the air. I struggled with what strength I had, but I might as well have laid still. I coughed, blood spurting from my mouth. Look at it all, Maggie. He grabbed my chin and turned my head to the scene below. The figures below got smaller and higher we went. The mass of battling figures was thinning, many of them now lying still and lifeless on the ground. They are like ants to us, worthless. Watch as your friends die for the humans, who are mere germs compared to us. You can't blame them for being inferior. They were born that way. But Yuki turned my face to his. His eyes were glowing almost red with hate and fury. He bared his teeth, fangs growing from his canines. You choose to be one of them. That makes you worse. And with that, he let go. I plummeted toward the earth. He swooped down into a dive and showed his hands into my shoulders. He pushed me down, and the world passed in a blur before me. I gripped his hands and tried to get him off, but I couldn't even budge him. I didn't feel the pain at first. All I was aware of was a loud ringing in my ears, and the fact that I could no longer move my left arm. Breathing was becoming increasingly difficult, and black spots were starting to cloud my vision. Everything seemed to stop. All motion, all life, including mine. The black dots covered my vision, and for just a moment, I blacked out. When I came to, the pain hit me. I cried out in shock and tried to move. Pain shot off me. My arm was useless, and my spine felt as if it was snapped in half. I simply stared out into the field, watching the battle. I could feel my clothes begin to soak with blood. I watched as flesh was torn from bone, as the lifeblood drained from the half, dead wounded. This is your fault. You know I watched as my friends, Kyle, Ellie, lay dead in the dirt. Your Ewik I watched as my friends killed ruthlessly. I watched their eyes as they grew blank with unconscious murder. I caught sight of Andrew. He had his hands around Jason's throat. They were fighting as humans, hand to hand. Andrew gave no leniency, and Jason's face was plastered with fear. Andrew leaned down and whispered something in Jason's ear. I know what you did, you sick bastard. I could feel Andrew's rage as he growled. And I'm gonna make you pay. Andrew punched Jason, his head snapping to the side. Jason lay in the red grass, helpless, as Andrew beat his fists into him. Blood dripped from Jason's face and body. He woke just in time to see Andrew shift into his wolf form. A look of complete terror engulfed Jason. Andrew seemed to smile as he growled at him, looming over Jason like death himself. He gripped his jaw around Jason's shoulder, and with one strong jerk, he ripped his arm from his body. Andrew tossed the detached limb to the side and turned his attention back to Jason. Blood was gushing from his shoulder as he screeched in pain. As he looked up at Andrew's murderous eyes, he knew that he was going to walk away from this. You're pathetic. I watched as Danny and Cotter ripped into each other, years' worth of anger and pain fueling their rage. They were counting on you to defeat him. I watched as Gage and Dalva threw each other across the field and back again. As I watched my friends fight, I realized that I saw fewer and fewer of them. More and more of my tech lay on the ground, wounded or dead, and more of the enemy piled on those who remained. And you failed. James sauntered to my side and knelt by me. Poor little Maggie, all alone now. You could barely scratch me with your little friend fighting with you, but now you're alone. What will you do now, little girl? He clenched his hand around my neck, crushing the air out of me. I swiped my hands at his arm, but it did nothing. I tried to put my shield up, to shift, anything, but my mind was as useless as my body. It's over, pathetic little child. You lost. My vision began to tunnel. Slowly the black closed in. Then, a blood-curdling scream echoed out to the mountains and back again. The battlefield grew silent. His hands loosened, and his whole weight fell on top of me. I took a deep breath and my vision restored. His face was a mere inch away from mine. Blood dripped from his mouth as he grumbled and coughed in pain. He opened his mouth to say something, but all that came out was a groan and a gush of blood. The light in his eyes faded as his muscles all went limp. Maddie, a voice called. Maddie, are you okay? Say something. Someone pushed James's lifeless body off me. They grabbed my face and turned it towards them. Bailey, I breathed. Oh, thank God you're okay. She exclaimed. I thought I was too late. Come on. She grabbed my shoulder and tried to help me up. I practically screamed in pain and my eyes began to water, but I let her prop me up with my good arm around her shoulder. I looked back to James's body. There was a combat knife sticking out of his back. You killed James, I groaned. She looked back at his body with a look of shock and recognition. Yeah, I did, Mags. Andrew ran through the now, still crowd. He took my weight from Bailey and gently lowered me into his arms as he knelt to the ground. As his arms wrapped around me, I barely felt the pain searing through my arm and ribs. Serene calm swept over me. Suddenly I felt comfortable, and my eyes began to close in exhaustion. My heartbeat synchronized with his and I could feel as he began to relax too. Why have you stopped? Danny looked around at his troops, but they were all staring at James's still body. Attack. No one moved. Do as you are ordered, damn it. All eyes were still on James. Danny got a look of hysteria in his eyes, and if I didn't know better, I would say they were glowing bright red with rage. Attack, damn you, attack. They won't listen to you anymore, James. They know without him, you have no more power. You're done. Connor turned from a fuming Danny to the frozen wolves before him. Go on. James is dead, you don't have to fight for him anymore. It's over in. One by one, Danny's wolves ran into the trees, disappearing from sight. Connor looked after the fleeing enemy with a look of contentment. As he watched them run from their tormentor, he whispered, Go home. Danny turned to Connor. You did this. He leapt at Connor, his hands reaching for his throat. You've ruined me. In his anger, Danny was sloppy. Connor grabbed onto him and whipped him around, throwing his arm around his neck. Goodbye, brother, he whispered. There was a loud snap as Connor jerked to the side in a quick movement. Danny's body fell to the ground, limp and hollow as ever. With the death of their leader, the last of Danny's pack fled into the woods. I caught a glimpse of Gage as he ran away with the rest of them. We were all silent, staring around at each other. We were injured, exhausted, and soaked in the blood of our kind. Our eyes drooped in sorrow and we held our limbs in pain. We looked around at our fallen comrades, our friends, our family. They stared at us with their dead eyes and we could not help but to stare back. Connor called out to what remained of his pack. Carry the wounded and as many of our dead as you can. Well, return for the rest. It over. Let's go home. Thank you all for joining me in the wild world of Wild Werewolf. I hope you had an amazing time. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments and likes, and come back for more wild adventures. See you next time.